Hello, everyone. Our topic today is Native American sovereignty, a highly important topic in the realm of Native American and United States history. First off, we will discuss why this is important. The purpose of this lesson is to develop an understanding and realize the importance of how tribal sovereignty affected the lives and affects the lives of Native Americans living in Minnesota and the United States. So first off, we'll start with a term you may have heard in your United States history class in high school, assimilation. Assimilation is a key part to the relationship between European immigrants and Native Americans in the 18th and 17th century, or 19th and 18th century. The definition of assimilation is when a majority group tries to force the beliefs or values of their group onto a minority group. That looked like Native American children being forced to learn, read, write, and speak English. That looked like them being forced into learning Christianity. That looked like Native Americans being forced into learning how to farm, agriculture, versus their um, hunter-gatherer lifestyle that they lived before, and gender roles where women were forced into the home instead of being out of the home and helping gather food for the family. Um, this idea of assimilation led to the Trail of Tears, which was when Native Americans were forced to give up land in eastern America and were forced to walk thousands of miles west into now what is known as Oklahoma. Settlers wanted land and the government agreed, so this removal was government-led as thousands relocated to what was deemed Indian land, the great unknown, the great frontier, western United States. It is important to know that during this time of assimilation, you had five civilized tribes, and they're known as this. You have the Choctaw tribe, the Chickasaw tribe, the Seminole, Creek, and the Cherokee tribes were all very successfully assimilated into European culture. Um, so next we'll talk about sovereignty. The definition of sovereignty is the supreme and uncontrollable power by which any dependent state is governed. This means that a state is able to make laws, taxes, etc., without the federal government interfering. How this differs with Native American sovereignty is Native Americans were not able to fully feel the freedom that a sovereign nation would. This means that Native Americans, they had to still follow federal laws and regulations, otherwise the federal government would enforce them. So they were still free, but not fully free at the same time. So this comes to the idea that Native Americans were living in a nation inside of a nation because you have this idea that they must rely on the help of the United States and Minnesota governments to fully achieve their status. They're like an independent state. However, because of their reliance on these governments or forced reliance on these governments, each reservation represents a domestic dependent nation. Um, and this coincides with the idea that each Native American was a dual citizen because they're technically a citizen of their nation, their reservation, their tribe, their community, but they're also a United States citizen. And but not until 1924, because in 1924, with the Snyder Act, Native Americans were given the right to full U.S. citizenship and the right to vote. It took them that long to realize that Native Americans were actual citizens. So here we have two maps. The left we have a map of the United States showing current um, reservations, and on the right we have Minnesota reservations. There are 11 or 12 depending on which website you look at. My question for you is, why is there such an absence of reservations in the eastern United States? We discussed this a couple slides back. So now that you know the history, let's talk about Native Americans and their relationship with the government of Minnesota. Just a few snippets, a few examples. When you think of Native Americans in Minnesota, what comes to mind? Discussion, discussion, discussion. Have you ever been to one of the 11 reservations in Minnesota? Discussion, discussion, discussion. Um, the map of Minnesota looks like that. Um, the layout of Minnesota has grown simply because of the amount of treaties that were formed in the 19th century between the US government and the tribes that were occupying this land. Each of these sections of Minnesota represents a swath of land that was given to the United States government for purposes of developing a state called Minnesota. I think it was declared a state in 1857, if I'm right. So the majority of these treaties were made before Minnesota was a state. Reservation treaties in the 19th century led to mass loss of land in return for money. The majority of the money given was given right back because the majority of Native Americans were owing people money due to trades. So taxation is a highly contested topic when it comes to Native Americans today. Um, Native Americans pay federal taxes on earnings on or off reservations except in ag production. Native Americans do not pay state taxes on income earned on the reservation. All earnings must be on the reservation for Native Americans to not pay that state tax, though. Tribal governments have the right to tax any earnings on the reservation. When it comes to non-natives in the reservation, the state can tax the income and the state is able to share taxes from earnings of non-natives on a reservation. Another topic would be law enforcement on reservations. It's kind of a overall opinion that law enforcement on reservations is lacking, but or they're pretty unknown to what is going on with law enforcement in reservations. With Public Law 280 of 1953 states that states have the right to handle criminal and civil jurisdiction cases that were previously controlled by tribal courts or federal courts. Tribal governments like Red Lake and another Bois Forte have powers different than the other reservations as they still get to handle misdemeanor crimes done by Native Americans. In the majority of reservations, though, the responsibility and authority comes down to the county sheriff or the elected band police officer. Last, we have gaming. The Indian Gaming Regulatory Act of 1988 gave gambling a structure. The law permits gambling on any Native American land with little state interference. And if there is a state interference, it has to deal with a compact, which is made between the reservation and the state government. This is where the tribe negotiates with the state about criminal and civil laws and the installation of new games. You see, the National Indian Gaming Commission is a group formed to develop classes in gaming. Um, and this was all put forth because of bingo and its rise in popularity in the 70s. Um, there needed to be some form of structure to it, and they created this. So you have three different classes of games, each with their own level of state interference. Class 3 being the highest. Tribes must work with the compact with the state government, which is where compacts come in. So, um, a discussion question here would be how many casinos can you name in the state of Minnesota? So to end this conversation, we are going to write a pros and cons list examining the involvement of the United States government on Native American life from what we have heard in my presentation today. Thank you.